Hi, this is Jeff Lesher with What's the Point? And the point this week is where we run into problems with our rather bifurcated and contradictory at times approach to learning and tolerance, or learning and inclusion, or learning and evolution. And I was reminded of this point with a number of stimuli, but the trigger was watching the first episode of a documentary on Netflix, which I recommend, called Amend. And this episode had to do with the 14th Amendment, which provides equal protection under the law and, in effect, granted citizenship to people who had formerly been slaves in the United States. Back in 1868 was when the amendment was ratified. And there's some discussion in the episode about Lincoln, President Lincoln, who at one point was hailed unabashedly in the sanitized version of U.S. history as the be-all, end-all from a presidential and personal ethics perspective. And increasingly over the years, as people have studied, especially his progression between 1850 and the end of his life at the beginning of his second term in office, and certainly 1850 to 1863 when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, that Lincoln was, like many of us, an imperfect character, or at least somebody who was able to listen, learn, and change for better, I would argue, over time. Now, there are actually folks in the U.S. who want to cancel Lincoln because he didn't always abide by the norms that we have today, or at least the ideals that we profess today, and at times said some things that would be considered impolitic at minimum, like supporting, as late as 1861, the colonization of a land outside of the U.S. on behalf of Black Americans, so that they could be sent somewhere else because they didn't fit in this country. And his reasoning for this was blatantly racist by any definition, but also in context at the time. So why do I share all this history about Lincoln? Well, it's interesting for one thing, but more importantly, it's representative of the challenge that we have today. We're so eager to dismiss people, one strike and you are out, versus creating the dialogue that we say we want to have, whether it's about social issues or work or the nexus of the two, and being willing to disagree or not fully agree, even more likely, over time, hoping to get to a point where there is greater agreement, but at least in between there's some working opportunity to evolve, to get smarter, to get better, to think differently about issues. And we've seen that this can happen, where we've run from everything from women's suffrage to marriage equality, and probably lots of other points, not probably, absolutely lots of other points in between, and we remain imperfect and in position to continue to progress. So just think about that when you're engaging with somebody with whom you don't fully agree, may not even closely align. Now, on the other side of the conversation, there has to be some parameter for, if not facts, at least credible points of view. Increasingly in our national discussion, there is this force field that's thrown up by some of a particular political leaning who have invested themselves in what are clearly conspiracy theories without any foundation. I mean, again, if we're being honest about it, let's just say it like it is. So QAnon as an example. And that is totally BS and laughable BS, except that it's so dangerous and corrosive. And people who are of that mind, whether they label themselves that way or not, will say, well, we just disagree. Well, yeah, we disagree, but we're disagreeing based on your investing belief in something that is absolutely, totally false. And I may be taking a point of view with which you don't agree substantively, but it's based in something that we like to call reality. We can't have a conversation if there's no playing field, however unlevel it might be, on which we agree to associate. Now, I'm a believer that those folks, however remarkable they may be, and challenging to many of us they are, they're in the vast minority. Now, there are a lot of people with whom we don't agree, but there are not that many people who are fully invested in stuff that is just plain BS. So back to the norm of social engagement and the engagement with those with whom we work. Let's find a way to be open to and really embrace the fact that we don't agree fully, at least yet, with a lot of people. And they should be the very ones with whom we are engaging in more conversation to understand better and differently in order for us to think better and differently. There's an article in the current issue, or the latest issue of Harvard Business Review, about creating the hybrid office. And that's a topic for another day, but the gist that connects to today's point is that we benefit from connection, physical connection, proximate connection. And the argument is made in the context of returning to some sort of office work environment, the so-called hybrid office, where we're not there all the time. And when we are there, we're not just focused on working heads down, being in meetings and so forth, but we're actually focused in part on knowing each other better, on enjoying each other more. And that's all part and parcel of the willingness and ability for us to engage in ways that allow us to explore where and how we're different, in part so that we can discover where and how we have points of connection, and that propels us forward. The point is that we will be living together regardless. Many of us work together, and in order for us to live better together and work better together, we have to understand each other better and do so with open minds and open hearts. And I believe that we can. We have to make that commitment and get away from this idea that if you say something that I don't agree with or don't like, I'm just going to remove you, so-called cancel you. And if cancel culture includes canceling Abraham Lincoln, folks, we've gone off the rails, and that's not a good place to be. So let's stay on track and forge a way forward together. That should be the point, I believe it is.